Welcome to this Facebook Live, and I'm really excited. I am going to be doing a Facebook Live every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central Time. So I opened up my calendar, I picked a time that's going to work for me every week so I can show up for you and answer your questions because I have so many of you that are reaching out and emailing me and asking questions. And then I use your questions to do these Facebook Live. So you can always email me at Cheryl@momsoftweensandteens.com. And then the next week, I will come on and I will answer your question personally. And if you want me to, you just email me and tag me or email me and I will tag you. Tell me it's okay for me to tag you so that you don't miss me personally answering your question. So today I want to answer a question that a mom sent me, and she was talking to me about some of the things that well, let me put it this way. She was saying, how can I improve my relationship with my teen? They don't want to talk to me. My relationship is not good. And I have seen this in the last couple of years. We used to be close, we used to have a good relationship, and now it feels like they're just like, I've lost them. What do I do? And this is such a common issue when we have teenagers, even as they enter the tween years. Who can relate where they start pulling away? They're not talking as much. You try to talk to them and you just feel like this wall goes up, or they're arguing with you and you're exhausted and you think, gosh, I don't know what I am doing wrong. And I've been there. I remember going into my bedroom and having the ugly cry and thinking, why is this kid totally, so often like arguing with me? And I say something and they roll their eyes or they grunt, or I ask them a question and it's wrong, or we go to the mall and we go shopping and it's like a nightmare. Just going through that, and all I want to do is try and connect with this kid. And yet maybe you're even feeling like, I don't like this kid that much. And I just want you to know that that is something that we often don't even want to admit. But sometimes you feel like you really don't like your teenager. You love them, but you don't like them. So I want to jump in and I want to share three things that if you stop doing these three things, you're going to see a huge improvement with your teen and even your tween. And even if you're married, your spouse or whatever, your mother-in-law. I mean, what I share, it really works with your teenager, but you can also use it in your other relationships and it can make a huge difference. So number one, okay, and these are, you're gonna relate to these because I just want to tell you, we all do them, every single one of us. And when we can be aware of when we're doing this, then that's when we can change it. But it's hard to change things that you're not aware of. And I'm going to drink my coffee with you this morning. Isn't this cute? Jen, who works for Moms of Tweens and Teens, she gave this to me, a cup of happy, and I love it. So, and if you don't know me, I'm Cheryl Gould. I'm the founder of Moms and Tweens and Teens, and I'm also a parenting educator and relationship coach. So that's who I am. If you're coming on here for the first time and you don't know me, welcome. I'm just so happy that you're here and that you're watching this. Okay, so number one of the biggest mistakes that if we stop doing this, it's going to make a huge difference in your relationship, is we give unsolicited advice. It is so easy to do. And what do I mean by unsolicited advice? They're not asking for advice. And yet we give it anyway. And I want you to start noticing that when you are having a conversation with your teen and they come to you and they've got this looks many different ways. Maybe they come to you and they're upset about something. Maybe their boyfriend or their girlfriend broke up with them and they're really hurting. And you see that, that comes up a lot. I get a lot of emails about that. And they're just heartbroken. It's really difficult when that's happening to sit in that pain with them. We want to fix it. We want to make them feel better. And because we're moms, it's brutal when we see our kids hurting. I mean, of course, we want to make it better. And so this is so natural and normal. However, it's like we jump so quickly to fix it mode. Why? Because we're so uncomfortable sitting in those feelings with our kids. So, what I want you to try is the next time your kid comes to you and they're hurting in some way, they're struggling in some way, I want you to practice listening 80% of the time and talk 20%. This is the 80-20 rule. And there's a saying that there's a reason that we have two ears and one mouth. And I love that because that's so true. And think about yourself when you call a friend or you're talking to somebody and you're sharing a problem that you have or a struggle or a challenge. And all of a sudden they jump in and they tell you how to fix it and what to do about it. How do you usually leave that conversation feeling? Well, I don't know about you, but I usually leave that conversation like not feeling very good. But if they listen to me and they're like, that is hard, like, I see how you're feeling makes so much sense to me. And they listen and they let me talk about it. I get off that call or with being with that friend and I feel so much better. And I want you to know that your tween or your teen has inside of them that wisdom and that we often don't give them credit for. When they can just have a sounding board, they can start figuring out what they need to do. When we're grieving, when we're sad about something, oftentimes we want to stuff it down. We don't want to feel it, but we want to help our kids to express it, to get it out. That's where a lot of times depression can come from, is where there our kids are, and it can happen with any of us. And I'm not talking about clinical depression, but just to feeling down. It's often because we're pushing, we're suppressing those emotions. And I'm a person that when I was young, and my dad died, we never, and I was 10 years old, we didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about how you felt. We stuffed it. And we sat at the dinner table and we didn't talk about it. And what happened as a result, I started having panic attacks. And at the time, I didn't know what they were. And then once I found somebody, it was a social worker at my middle school, and I thought, am I going crazy? What is wrong with me? And then when I would try to talk, my mom meant well, but she would say, you have so much to be grateful for. Look at this, look at that. And, gratitude is really important. And that's a whole nother conversation. But we need both. We need to be able to talk about our sadness. Our kids need to be able to talk about those things with us and have us be that safe place. But you can't really, if you're just moving into being grateful and thinking about your blessings, you're like slapping a band aid on a gushing wound. You need to get it out and then you can move into a different space. But we forget that. Another thing we do when it comes to unsolicited advice is at this age we're like watching, and because we're older and we're wiser, we can see where this is going to take them. Like, we're like, oh my gosh, you make this choice, it's not going to go well for you, you know or maybe you're panicked, like your kid right now is not, they don't want to participate in activities and they're more isolated. And so you make all these suggestions about what they should do. And what do? They don't do it. They're not usually open. I mean, if your kid is open to those suggestions, it's usually because they're asking you. There is a difference. And so, a couple of things that you can do when this is the situation is you can say to them, okay, I hear that you want to do X, Y, and Z. Let me know, what are you thinking about that? Tell me more about that. You want to, and I'm not saying that this is easy, but we can become more skilled. We can practice this. And actually, if you're doing it 40% of the time, you're doing an awesome job. You're going to see it makes a big difference. But realize when, just start noticing in your body when you're feeling scared or you're feeling like you want to control something, when you want to jump in with that advice. And then notice when you do, your kid's going to stop talking to you. It's I still do it. We're still going to do it. And the wall goes up. And all of a sudden they stop talking. And then you try to talk a little bit more and they don't want to talk. They're like, forget it, right? Or yeah, whatever. And they're just silent and they just stop talking. You think, what just happened? It's usually because we're not listening and we're jumping in with that advice. Another thing you can do is you can ask, do you just want to talk about this right now, or do you want to know my thoughts? So you're asking if they want to know your thoughts, but you have to listen first and give them that space. Then you might want to, the conversation, you've listened, and then maybe the next day you say, hey, I was thinking about that, you were thinking about whatever it is. Have you thought about that anymore? I had a couple thoughts. Do you want to know what they are? Right? Or maybe they want to do something and you don't want them to do it. So that's going to go into number 3. We'll talk about what that one is. But also, if that happens, a lot of times we want to give advice to stop that mistake from happening, right? We can kind of see if they do this or they don't do this, something bad might happen. So that's when you can ask, okay, tell me more about your thoughts here. And have you thought about XYZ? So you're taking the advice you're going to give and you're asking versus telling. So when you notice you're wanting to tell them something and give that unsolicited advice, turn it around and ask a question instead. Also, when you notice your kids are feeling something and you want to jump in and fix it and make it better, instead reflect what they're feeling. So you look upset, you look sad, you look angry, then you shut up. A lot of times, I didn't put this in here, but a lot of times this goes with the 80-20, I guess. A lot of times we talk too much, we just don't shut up, and give the space. And that's really hard to do too, because I don't know about you, but if everybody listened to me and they took my advice, I think everything would go really well. But this is an age where our kids are breaking away and they are getting ready to be adults. Like they are on this trajectory when they're teens. And the problem is we often try to fix things for them. We try to fix their problems. We try to tell them what to do, which is not preparing them well. We have to get them to connect the right and the left side of their brain in order to equip them to make better decisions. So more on that. I can talk more on that even next week and in further weeks. Number 2. Stop taking the bait. What do I mean by this? Well, teens say the darndest things. And when they say something, it can really get us going, churn us up, be upsetting. We want to correct them. And yeah, we just know what that's like. And so what we do is we take the bait, we bite down on it, we get hooked, and then what happens? Then we're off to the races. And when we get hooked and we bite down on the hook and we swallow it whole, it does not go well. It usually leads to power struggles, to arguments. It ends up being this black and white, like they're saying it's white, and and I talked about this a little bit last week. and it's clearly black, right? They're saying it's white, and you're like, they're not making any sense. And it's so frustrating. But what happens is we get into the right or wrong. And I want you to know in any relationship that you're in, if you're in the right, who's wrong, it's like a ping pong ball. You don't get anywhere. And it is a relationship killer because it gets us nowhere. And I actually did this last week with one of my kids. I got hooked, and it was like a hot topic for me. And we disagree in this one area. And this is my kid that's older and no longer a teenager. I took the bait. It was very disconnecting. We got into an argument, and I thought, see there, Cheryl, you got to take your own advice. that did not go anywhere good. But it does happen. And we can always ask for a redo. Like, okay, we can stop ourselves. All right, halt, stop, and let's have a redo. And I would do that with my kids, and I still do it. And it's pretty funny, actually. Now we laugh. I'm like, okay, let me wind up, and I'll make the sound of like a tape recorder, like, let's me wind up there. I didn't handle that well. And let's have a conversation about this. So what do we do when we get into the power struggles and we notice we want to take the bait? So this is where you want to remind yourself that this is their job, okay? Developmentally, they're trying to form their own sense of identity apart from you. This is so important, especially with social media, where our kids are looking outside of their selves for their sense um, of how many likes do I get? Their what do I want to say? Self-esteem. And they're constantly looking outside of themselves for their value and their worth versus being grounded in who they are. And so we have a really powerful influence on helping them. How do we do that? We say, well, what do you think about that? What do you want to do in this situation? Tell me about your thought process in this. Now, if I would have gone back and done that differently with my daughter, and I could have said, not taken the bait, okay, well, I want to see this from your perspective. I see it a little differently. Explain to me your perspective. I mean, wouldn't it be cool to be a home where we can share our thoughts, our beliefs, our values, and be curious about them and have healthy conversation around it, even if we don't see eye to eye? I mean, for me, that is like the North Star, right? I want to be able to be a person that can do that and can seek to understand who my kids are, whoever it is, to see, because we assume we know our kids, but getting to know them. And so what ended up happening in my conversation with my daughter is that when she explained to me her perspective, then I got her heart. So even though and I'm going to sneeze here, I think, excuse me, I put on some lemon essential oil and I think I overdid it a little bit. Anyway, so when we can get curious instead of judging, so we often judge our kids and they feel that judgment when they say something. So taking the bait, we have to really work on not being judgmental, minding ourselves. They're trying to develop their own sense of identity and who they are apart from us. It's really uncomfortable. It's really hard. They're going to argue. They're going to fight against what we say. But the more that we can give that space to them and be curious, it actually does the opposite in a good way. So what do I mean by that? If we're taking the bait, we're arguing, this is an age where they're going to resist and they are going to go the opposite direction and they're going to move away from us. In order to bring them closer and connect with them, we want to be more curious. And that the greater the chances are that they will come back around, that they will have healthy values, and they will develop that strong sense of self, because we want that. We don't want either a rebel that's going to rebel against what we say, or a people pleaser. I was a people pleaser. I went along because if I disagreed, that was not good in my family growing up. And you would be criticized. It was not good. And I mean, it's not black or white, but I ended up, for many different reasons, being a people pleaser. And so when I got into my job, my 20s, what happened? I had a harder time asserting myself and being able to say no. We want our kids to be able to say no to what's not good for them. We want our kids to be able to set healthy boundaries. We want our kids to not join in if something's not good for them. And kids are all over here making bad decisions and they want to belong so badly that they jump in and they do that. Now, they are going to do a little bit of that. They are going to make mistakes. And so they need to figure out how to belong and how, at the same time, developmentally, how to say no to what's not going to be good for them. And so by not taking the bait and by being curious to know what they think, we're going to help them to develop those skills when we do that. Number 3, stop trying to control things. Oh my goodness. I'm a recovering controller. I mean, and I'm going to tell you, having kids that are older now and not teenagers, the more we try to control things, the worse we make things. And my oldest is 31. She actually just turned 31. So I have I've had a long time, my younger kids, to work on these things. And I can see in every way that I tried to control her, I actually created the very thing that I didn't want to create. So what do I mean by that? The more I tried to clamp down on her, the more that she wanted to break free. Because our kids, remember, they are hardwired right now to launch into adulthood. And I was scared. And when we control, usually what's driving that is fear. And fear is never going to get us anywhere good. It is going to not help our kids. It is going to create resistance and rebellion, and it's going to hurt our relationship with them. And how do we do this when we're trying to control? A lot of times we threaten because we're scared. We punish. That's different than having healthy boundaries and limits. Punishing is punitive and it makes our kids angry. And we feel really powerless. And that's one of the reasons that we do it. And then we get overly into their business, which teenagers at this age, they're private. Now, that's a whole nother conversation that I'm not going to go into more depth around today. But when we do these things, it's usually gonna shut down our kids, and they're gonna rebel, and they're gonna sneak. They're gonna sneak around when we try to control things. And you know what the truth is? And this is why I started Moms of Tweens and Teens. It's really difficult because we don't have as much control. Because they can, if you say you cannot leave the house, they can get up and leave, especially when you have like a 6'2", 200-pound boy living in your house. And they say, I'm going anywhere. I'm going anyway. You can't control me. That's really hard. And so we have to think about, what do we really have control over and what we don't? And so here's some things that you can do instead, okay? Think about what you can control. And tomorrow in the Inner Circle membership, which is going to open up in September, I'm doing a whole workshop on boundaries. So, and I did a 3-day. So if boundaries are hard for you, email me, DM me. I have a whole course on this because it's a huge issue. So we can't go into all of it today, but I actually have a column that I use with moms that's what can I control and what can't I control? And we go through that. So you got to get really clear on what you can and can't control. One of the biggest things that we can control, and usually the only thing, is how we're going to respond. And one of the best ways that we can respond is we can think about what is going to build a healthier connection with my kid. And a lot of times we focus more on the negative and the things that need to be fixed, or we say no, rather than on nurturing that relationship and focusing on this kid and the positives. And I know if you've got a defiant kid at home, that's hard to do because they go for a lot of negative attention. But just start noticing the little things that they're doing. And maybe try and experiment and say for one day, I'm going to not nag. I'm going to not focus on the negative. I'm going to, focus on just saying, wow, thanks. You picked up your cup and you brought it to the sink. I really appreciate that. Just even that, just a little something, that you can focus on that's positive. And last week I talked about choking the weeds and feeding the good stuff. And the more that we feed the good stuff, the more positive. There's been so many studies done, the more good stuff we're going to get. So that's one thing that we can do instead of controlling. We can control ourselves. Number 2, safety. One of the biggest things that we fear is our kids being safe. So let's say one of the things that I always wanted to control is my kid going and doing things that I was scared they weren't going to be safe doing. So I live in the northern suburbs of Chicago. I live north of Chicago. And my kids love to go to the city of Chicago. Now, Chicago is an awesome city, great city. You hear so much about it because there's so much violence going on in the inner city in Chicago, and it's very sad. But it's still the city of Chicago, And yet, when my kids went to college or they leave our nest or whatever that looks like for your kid, they need to learn the skills on how to thrive and how to be independent and how to keep themselves safe. Going to the mall is a big one now because we hear all the horrible stories about, sex trafficking and strangers, walking up to girls and even guys and, things that can go on. And it is scary. But I want you to think about baby steps. How can you help to keep your kid safe? And what might that look like to prepare them for when they do leave your home? Because that's what we're supposed to be doing, preparing them. So let's say you do have a tween or a 13-year-old. And I find, unfortunately, that we're so afraid we're not letting our kids step out and prepare them. And so 13, we're scared to even let them go to the mall by themselves. And I'm not saying let them go by themselves when they're 13. I am saying say yes as many times as you can and prepare to keep them safe. So what do I mean by that? Okay, I hear you want to go to the mall with your friend. Okay, a little uncomfortable with that. So just admit, feeling a little uncomfortable. That's a little scary for mom to just let you go with your friend. And I get it. That's fun. You want to go to the mall. I mean, I think when I was a kid, I was dropped off at the mall. I don't know. I was pretty darn young and we were just allowed to roam, right? But now we hear all the scary stories. But think about, okay, if I say yes to that, what do I have to do in order for me to feel okay with it? And talk to your kid about it. So that might look like, okay, I hear you want to go to the mall. This is, for mom, I want to say yes to this. So let's talk about how this is what I'm afraid. I know I sound crazy, but there's unsafe people there. So if you have somebody walk up to you, what are you going to do? And you want to talk through these things. And maybe it's, okay, I remember with my daughter, it was like, okay, I'm going to go sit outside the store on one of those benches, and you guys can go to all these stores and then come back and check in with me. And so that's the first step that I did. Then I ended up going to the food court, and I sat in the food court and they checked in. And then by the time they were 15, they could go by themselves and they would text me and they would check in. I would drop them. Maybe I'd sit out my car, or I'd run a few errands myself, and then I'd come back. Because why? Because when they go to they are 16, they're off in the car. You don't know where they're going. And so you gotta be thinking about how to prepare them rather than control them. And it's scary to start letting go. I still worry. And yet I know that my kids need to develop that they need to be able to be independent. They need to be prepared. And so we need to be doing those things right now is how do we prepare them? And I love saying yes as much as we can. So my daughter wanted to start going down on the train with her friends to Chicago. Wasn't really comfortable, too young. So what did I do? We talked about it, and I drove them down, and I stayed with them, and they ate at a restaurant, and I sat at a separate table, and I could see them, you see? So it's a slow progression. The more that we try to control, the more it's going to hurt our relationship with our kids. And so start thinking about how you can give them more freedom, more independence, and prepare them for a future. And having a great relationship, they're going to make wiser decisions. And lastly, in closing, I'm going to go over the chat to see, the comments, see if there's any questions after this, if you want to put questions in. Invest in your relationship with your kids. Start thinking about ways that you can connect with them. Little ways. Take them to Starbucks drive-through. Bring them home. Think about what speaks to them. What speaks love to them. You can go to lovelanguages.org. There's one for teenagers. If they're willing, have them take it or think about it. Sometimes they're not willing to take it, but you can actually feel like you know them. You can answer some of the questions for them and start speaking their love language. One of my kids is touch. Oh my gosh, love to have a back rub, love to be, have their back scratched. I have another kid, they do touch is not their thing. Acts of service and gifts is their thing. And so I know that little surprises, just little things, that I can do to show love and appreciation is huge. Words of affirmation, another big one. And you know what? My most rebellious kid is the one that is the most hungry for verbal affirmation. Isn't that something? And just knowing that I can even see it, and they're older now, I can see it. When I affirm them for something they're doing, it's like you dropped a coin in a bank, right? Or in a piggy bank. I see it go in and it fills them up. And I can see like a shift even in their face. It feeds their heart so much. So be curious about what that might look like. Okay, I'm going to come over here. Hi, Constance. So good to see you here. I'm always pressing the rewind button. Such great suggestions. I too am a recovering controller. Yeah, who else is on here that's a recovering controller? I think, and we all are, right? I think we all are. Why? Because we love our kids. We want good things. We care about them. It's in our DNA, right? As moms. And so it's not like this stuff is like bad and we're bad for feeling this way. It's so understandable. And we can just normalize it and speak kindly to ourselves. Hi, Brandy. How are you? So good to see you here today. How do I stop my 7-year-old son who acts like a tween from sneaking and hiding sweets and lying about it, even after I know the truth? Ooh, I had one that actually did that. and where I would find these wrappers in their closet. And actually, she's here in the other room, and she used to do that all the time. And I don't know what is that about. I think don't make it about the lying. That's what I would say. Now, I also want you to know that there's something that happens developmentally. Now, it's funny that your 7-year-old son, you said, acts like a tween. Sometimes it hits younger, and um, and this happens with them where developmentally, and the research shows that when they're in the middle school years, they actually lie more. When they come out of the teen years, they don't quite lie as much. And what they found is it wasn't even so much the worrying about getting in trouble as it was disappointing us. So I would have a conversation with your son, which you probably have, Brandy, but so I'm just going to answer this as if you have not. So I would just say, I'm noticing that you're sneaking the sweets, you're hiding them, you're lying about it. So no shame, no shame. Let's just talk about it. Let's talk about that. And maybe you can actually come up like, okay, you love these sweets and you love these things. So how can we make it where you're not having to sneak? Because you know what? Hiding, hiding and sneaking never feels good to us. So that could be a lesson that you could really talk about. Like when we're sneaking and hiding, we're keeping a secret, because that's actually, and I'm not saying this about him, but when somebody has an addiction, that is the cycle where we have our little addiction, we sneak something, right? We don't want anybody to know about it, then we feel shame about it, and around we go. So what do we do to get out of that cycle is we tell the truth about it and we bring it out of the dark and into the light. And so I would try to talk to him in not a very non-shaming way, and be curious about it, and tell him you're noticing it. And maybe you can talk about it. And also, I don't know, you have to kind of think about what you can do. Do you not buy them anymore? Do you not have them in your house anymore? Now, I interviewed on my podcast, oh gosh, what's her name now? She just wrote a book on body image, and she is at Rutgers, Dr. Charlotte Markey. And she was talking about, she's like the #1 body image researcher in the country. And she was saying making foods good or bad in the research really makes them want them that much more, which I thought was interesting. And then she was saying not to use the word junk food, where I'm like, oh man, I definitely say junk food all the time, talk about it too much. But I think that the one thing you want to focus on is just having a conversation about how it doesn't feel good to sneak, and then being curious about why he might be sneaking. Is it that he doesn't want to hear no? So how can we make it where you don't have to sneak? And don't say anything. See what he says. Maybe, you say, okay, you can have these sweets. Let's try it. Let's try it for a couple of days. You can have them without sneaking, and just see what happens, and let it maybe be okay. And maybe you'll even notice he cuts down on the sweets that he's eating, because sometimes feel like we can't have something, we want to sneak it, we don't want to hear no. Who wants to hear no? But I would get it into the open, have a non-judgmental conversation, and see what he has to say, and see if you can come up with something that you can both agree upon. Okay. And then just see, and Brandy, let me know, see if come back around, DM me how it goes, and say, okay, let's try. Can have 10 sweets. I don't know. Are they little candies or ding dongs or Twinkies? I don't know. I got the other day, we went to the ice cream store, and Parlor, and I'm not a big ice cream fan, but I got a couple of big bags of candy, and ashamedly ate the whole thing. And my husband and my daughter are like, oh, mom. But it was delicious. But if somebody had told me I couldn't have it, um, that's when I get rebellious. Like, who are you to tell me I can't have this? So we want to help our kids, and that's going to help your son to develop better self control as well. So hope that was helpful, Brandy. It's always good to try different things, but if we shame and we blame, our kids are going to have to, they're going to feel the need to sneak around. So anyway, I have to jump off. Let me see if anybody else, but thanks for joining me. I love that you're here with me. And remember, every Wednesday at 9 a.m., I am going to Central. I'm going to be doing a Facebook Live. And I want to come on here. I want to connect personally with you. And I would love for you to DM me or email me at Cheryl@momsofTweensandTeens.com and ask a question. And I'll come back next week and I'll answer it, because that's why I'm here. I'm here to serve you, to answer your questions, to show up for you. And then also know that we have MOTSuniversity.com, MOTTS University.com. There's all kinds of resources on there, free. There's courses that you can pay for, but there's also all kinds of free workshops that are on there, printables to connect, like tons of stuff for you guys. So a lot of times you don't know that that's there for you. And then sign up for our newsletter at momsoftweensandteens.com. It's tweensandteens.com. And you can sign up so that you can stay informed, because in September, we're going to do a 3-day free workshop that's an hour every day. And then I'm opening up the Inner Circle, which is this incredible moms group and support. And we have an 8-week parenting program in there, and I get to really connect with you. So that's going to be opening up. And then there's a podcast, the Moms of Tweens and Teen podcast. So be looking for that as well, because my mission is to serve you any way that I possibly can. And so let me know how I can do that more effectively, because I'm here for you. Okay. Have a great day, and I hope to hear from you. All right. See you later, and try one little thing that I shared, and then let me know how it goes. All right. See you later. Thanks for being with me.